Go ahead, walk away. Ethan Whitmore's voice echoed through our penthouse, smooth and arrogant as always. He swirled his glass of Macallan, the light from the chandelier catching the amber liquid. You wouldn't last a week without me, Layla. Without my money, my connections, my protection, you'd be nobody again. I didn't argue. I reached into my Chanel bag, pulled out my keys, house, Range Rover, and placed them neatly on the granite counter. You're right, I said calmly. Let's find out. Then I walked out, leaving behind everything he'd ever bought for me. Before we continue, if you believe no woman should ever be underestimated or silenced for standing up for herself, make sure to subscribe. It's completely free and it helps us share more stories of courage and justice, just like Layla's. Now let's see how she turns her husband's cruel game into his ultimate downfall. Now 3 hours later, I sat in the lobby of the Grand Royal Hotel, watching the live feed from our penthouse cameras. Ethan was pacing the kitchen calling someone, probably his partner Adrian or maybe his father Gregory. Definitely not the police. What could he say? My wife left her keys and walked out. The concierge approached. Miss Hawthorne, your suite is ready. My maiden name. It felt strange but empowering. I'd made the reservation with my own money, 6 figures I'd earned from what Ethan mocked as my little hobby of day trading. No one knew that his initial allowance of $10,000 had become enough to live on for years. The suite was smaller than our penthouse but felt infinitely larger in freedom. I set down my single suitcase, the one I'd hidden at the gym for months, slowly filling with essentials he'd never noticed missing. Ethan monitored our cards but never questioned gym trips. After all, trophy wives had to maintain their value. My phone buzzed, 17 missed calls. I deleted his contact and let the number become just digits. The first voicemail played. Layla, this is ridiculous. Come home. We'll talk. By the 5th message, his tone cracked. You can't just leave. Half of everything is in both our names. That morning already felt like a lifetime ago. I'd woken up alone as usual. He'd slept in his study, surrounded by trading monitors. Today was our anniversary. Not that he'd remembered. While looking for insurance papers in his office, I knocked over his recorder and accidentally played his voice. She asked to see our investment statements yesterday. He laughed. I told her they were too complicated. Adrian, I could get her to sign over her kidneys, and she'd ask which pen to use. Then came the line that ended everything. That's why this type is perfect. Pretty enough for photos, dumb enough to control. My father taught me well. Marry beauty, rent intelligence. I replaced the recorder and kept searching, only to find forged prenuptial amendments stripping me of everything if I left. In that moment, something inside me hardened. Ethan thought I was a decorative investment. He was wrong. From my hotel window, I could see the penthouse lights still blazing. He was searching for what I'd taken. But I hadn't stolen anything yet. Only prepared. The keys I'd left weren't surrender. They were the opening move in a war he didn't know had already begun. 3 weeks had passed since I left the penthouse. My days followed a quiet rhythm. Morning trades from my hotel suite, afternoon walks through Central Park, evenings reviewing the documents Evelyn Carter had begun slipping me, piece by piece. Each file revealed another layer of corruption buried within Whitmore Global Investments. But today was different. Today was May 15th, our wedding anniversary. Despite everything, I had agreed to meet Ethan for dinner. His voice over the phone had been careful, neutral. We need to be civilized about this. At the salon on 5th Avenue, Celeste worked her fingers through my hair with practiced grace. Special occasion? She asked. Anniversary dinner, I said, my reflection staring back at me. A sleek, polished version of the woman he had molded. The dress I'd chosen was dark blue, his favorite color on me. It cost $8,000, charged to a credit card he hadn't frozen yet. I wasn't dressing for him. I was dressing for the woman who would end this stud. On my way out of the salon, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Slight change, Adrian and Sienna joining us. Need to discuss the Singapore deal. Same time, of course. Our anniversary had turned into a business meeting. I typed a single word, perfect, and didn't bother adding the usual heart emoji. 20 minutes later, another text came through. Actually, father insists we come to the estate. He's having something catered. 8 p.m. I gave the driver Gregory Whitmore's address in Westchester. The irony was sharp. I was wearing a gown worth more than most people's yearly rent to have dinner in the house of a man who had once introduced me as Ethan's pretty wife. The circular driveway glowed under the estate's golden lights. I recognized several cars, Adrian's Bentley, two partners' Aston Martins, even Oliver Grant's new Tesla. This wasn't a casual dinner. It was an ambush. Patricia, Gregory's third wife, barely 28, answered the door. Her smile was strained, her eyes warning me to tread carefully. "Layla, you look stunning," she said softly. Her gaze, however, asked, "Why did you come?" Inside, the sitting room buzzed with conversation. Ethan stood near the fireplace, drink in hand, performing as though nothing had ever happened. When he saw me, his eyes flicked over my dress, my hair, my calm expression, and then slid away. "Layla," Gregory boomed, stepping out from his study. He kissed my cheek, the scent of cigars and bourbon thick in the air. "I hear you've been making things difficult. Bad for business, my dear." Evelyn appeared then, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. For just a moment our eyes met. Her expression didn't change, but her voice, when she handed me a glass, barely whispered. "Some anniversaries are about endings, not beginnings." The dining table was set for 12. Around it sat the men who owned half of New York, and the women who smiled beside them. I took my seat, realizing with icy certainty that every detail tonight had been orchestrated to remind me of my place, but I hadn't come here to be reminded. I'd come to remember who I really was, and to start taking everything back. Dinner at the Whitmore estate began like a performance everyone had rehearsed too many times. Between courses, the laughter was too sharp, the glances too knowing. I recognized several faces, partners from Whitmore Global Investments, their wives arranged like trophies beside them. Across the table, Adrian raised his glass. "To Ethan," he said, smirking, "the empire builder." Gregory chuckled. "And to his beautiful wife, the empire's finest ornament." Polite laughter rippled around the table. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his smile dripping with false charm. "Funny story about how Layla and I met," he began. "She wandered into the Milken conference thinking a derivatives panel was about art derivatives. She even asked if hedge funds were about gardening." The men laughed too loudly. The wives smiled thinly. The story was fiction, but Ethan loved retelling it because it made him sound brilliant and me small. I'd been at that conference presenting my graduate thesis on market manipulation, but that truth didn't fit his version of the world. "Thank God for lost puppies," Adrian added, lifting his glass. "They make the best pets." Sienna, his wife, caught my hand under the table, a quick squeeze meant to comfort. Her pity burned worse than the insult. I smiled politely, then murmured, "Excuse me," and slipped away. Richard's, no Gregory's, study door was half open. Inside, his computer screen glowed in the dim light. I stepped in silently, memorizing the space, the desk layout, the wall safe hidden behind a terrible reproduction of Monet's water lilies, and the filing cabinet marked private. A post-it note was stuck to his monitor. Gregory 1936. His birth year. And his favorite Shakespeare character, Richard III. These men thought themselves untouchable, but their arrogance made them predictable. Through the window, I could see the dining room. Laughter rolled again. Ethan stood now, gesturing with his wine glass as he told another embellished story. They all looked so confident, so secure, unaware that I was in the next room gathering the threads of their downfall. When I returned to the table, the talk had shifted to business, Singapore expansion, leverage ratios, risk assessments. The wives stayed silent, decorative accessories in a room full of predators. Then Adrian, drunk and cruel, turned toward Ethan. "You know what she is, buddy? She's the trophy case. Beautiful, elegant, but only for display." Laughter followed, edged with malice. Ethan raised his glass. "Best investment I ever made," he said smoothly. "Great tax benefits, minimal maintenance, and she appreciates in value at all the right social events." Evelyn was clearing plates, her movements deliberate, controlled. Our eyes met again across the table, and in that brief glance I saw it. 40 years of quiet rage, 40 years of watching women like me be diminished and discarded. Her faint nod told me everything. She'd heard it all, recorded it all, and she was ready when I was. As I left that night, the diamond on my hand caught the light, cold, sharp, and full of promise. For the first time, it didn't feel like a symbol of status. It felt like a weapon. 3 days later, I sat in the back corner of the Golden Lotus Cafe, a quiet Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, its windows fogged with years of steam. It was the kind of place no one from Ethan's world would ever think to visit, perfect for what needed to happen next. Evelyn Carter was already there, wearing a cardigan despite the humid air. To anyone else, she looked like an aging secretary having tea, but her eyes told another story, sharp, unflinching, and filled with decades of carefully caged fury. "Mrs. Whitmore," she began softly. "Hawthorne," I corrected. "I'm using my maiden name now." A flicker of approval crossed her face. She pushed a small tin of butter cookies across the table. The tin looked harmless, decorated with faded blue flowers. "Twist the lipstick at the bottom 3 times, then pull," she instructed. Inside was a tube of lipstick that, when opened, revealed a flash drive hidden inside. 16 gigabytes, she said quietly. "Everything I've collected since 1982. I stared at the tiny device resting between us. "What kind of evidence?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Richard's, Gregory's first wife Elena, asked me to watch, to listen. She noticed the numbers didn't add up. A few months later, she had a car accident. Perfect weather. No skid marks. After that, I kept everything. Every memo, every call log, every mistress paid off with company funds, every falsified SEC report." The waiter brought tea, and we waited until he left. Evelyn poured carefully, her hands steady until she said the next part. The second wife, Caroline, MBA from Wharton, started asking questions too. He had her committed for exhaustion. She signed the divorce papers from a psychiatric ward. My stomach turned. 40 years of secrets, of women erased and rewritten. "And you kept it all?" "Every file," Evelyn nodded. "But there's more. Your husband isn't just complicit. He's continuing the pattern. He's been grooming Sienna Cross, Adrian's wife. There's a paper trail, hotel bookings, shell company payments, flowers charged to corporate cards. Gregory taught his son well." The teapot steamed between us as the words sank in. My fingers clenched around my cup. "They're planning to replace me." Evelyn met my gaze. "And destroy you first." That dinner at the estate, it wasn't just humiliation. It was documentation. "They'll say you're unstable, unfit, impulsive." The same story they've told for decades. I sat back, my heartbeat steady now, cold and deliberate. "Then it's time I write a new story." That night, I uploaded Evelyn's files to an encrypted cloud she didn't even know existed. But I needed more, Ethan's own documents, the internal records that would tie everything together. At midnight, I called my lawyer, Naomi Blake. "I need to create a company," I told her. "Something clean. Something that sounds like nothing." "When?" Naomi asked. "Tomorrow." Because if Gregory and Ethan had spent 40 years building their empire on other people's silence, I was done being quiet. The next morning, I drove 2 hours north to Naomi Blake's office in Connecticut, a quiet town far from Ethan's Wall Street kingdom. Her office sat above a tax preparer and a dentist, no marble floors, no pretentious artwork, just framed diplomas and the smell of burnt coffee. She'd already drawn up the papers. "Silver Arc Holdings, LLC," Naomi said, sliding documents across the desk. "Incorporated in Delaware, registered here in Connecticut, owned by a trust that leads nowhere. Completely legal, but impossible to trace without months of forensic digging." "Perfect," I said. Naomi leaned back, studying me. "Women don't pay triple for a rush job like this unless they're preparing for war." I smiled faintly. "You're right." A week later, Ethan left for Singapore, 5 days of meetings or so, he said. Evelyn's intel told me otherwise. He was setting up offshore accounts. When he was gone, I told Lucia, our housekeeper, to take the week off. "Paid vacation," I said. She looked relieved. Then I locked the penthouse doors and got to work. Alone in that sterile palace, I became someone new. Not the trophy wife, not the ornament, but a forensic archaeologist unearthing her own extinction. Ethan's office password was painfully sentimental. Our wedding date. Inside, his computer unfolded like a confession booth. Folder after folder revealed trades timestamped to Gregory's meetings with CEOs. Within hours of those lunches, Ethan would make transactions that mirrored insider information. The pattern was undeniable once you knew where to look down a locked drawer. I found letters between Ethan and Adrian discussing my mental fragility, plans to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist, one conveniently linked to the same doctor who had signed Caroline Whitmore's institutional papers years ago, and why hands didn't shake. I photographed every page, uploaded them to SilverArc's encrypted cloud, and returned the originals to their exact places, down to the millimeter. Then I found it, a file labeled Exit Strategy. Inside were documents outlining Ethan's plan to file for divorce, claim abandonment, and transfer marital assets to secure accounts. The timeline ended with my removal. Financially, legally, and socially, I sat in his leather chair, staring out the window at the glittering city he believed he controlled. Somewhere below, Gregory was probably making calls, Evelyn was likely filing her reports, and Naomi was building the next step of my escape. Ethan had once said I wouldn't survive without him, but as I stared at his empire laid bare before me, I realized something simple and terrifying. He wasn't the genius I'd married. He was just a man who mistook control for intelligence and cruelty for strength. By the time his plane landed in Singapore, I had everything I needed to destroy him, and for the first time in years I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Ethan returned from Singapore 5 days later bringing lilies, my least favorite flowers. He had remembered that once, years ago, I'd mentioned preferring roses. Lilies meant one thing. He was paying attention now, and that made him dangerous. "Thought we could have dinner together," he said, placing the bouquet on the same granite counter where I'd left my keys. "Like we used to. We hadn't eaten together without guests in months." He poured Bordeaux, the good kind he usually saved for clients, and arranged cheese with unusual precision. His hands trembled slightly. "I've been thinking," he began, sitting across from me at our oversized dining table. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just us. Somewhere quiet. Remember that place in Montana with no cell service? You loved the mountains." He said it like an invitation, but I heard the warning underneath. Isolation. No witnesses. No escape. "When?" I asked, cutting a piece of cheese. "Tomorrow," he said quickly. Too quickly. He pushed a folder across the table. "New insurance policies. Better coverage for both of us." His eyes stayed fixed on me, watching for hesitation. Under the table, my phone silently photographed every page, uploading them to SilverArc Holdings. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked. "Completely," I lied, signing my name with steady hands, the same hands that were dismantling his empire piece by piece. 3 days later, my mother arrived from Ohio. Ethan had personally picked her up from the airport, carried her bags, asked about her garden like the perfect son-in-law. She was glowing by the time they reached the penthouse. "Oh, honey," she whispered when he stepped out of the room. "You didn't tell me things had gotten better." He's so attentive. He was performing and she was the audience. For a week, Ethan played his role flawlessly. Broadway shows he once called a waste of time. Dinners at impossible-to-book restaurants. A spa day for Mom and me while he handled business. He toasted her at dinner, calling her the woman who raised such an incredible daughter. Watching him work his charm was almost artful, and utterly chilling. I'd never seen him try before. That night, Mom sat beside me on the bed, her eyes soft and worried. "Honey, you've lost weight. And your smile, it feels practiced. Are you happy?" Through the open doorway, I saw Ethan's shadow in the hallway, listening. "I'm exactly where I planned to be," I said clearly, loud enough for him to hear. When my mother left, the act ended. Evelyn messaged me. "Meet at the New York Public Library reading room. It's time." The irony wasn't lost on me. She taught literacy to immigrants surrounded by men who'd spent decades pretending not to read the consequences of their own greed. At that table, she laid out old newspaper clippings like tarot cards. Wives lost, institutionalized, erased. You're at 4 years, 3 months, she whispered. Whatever you're planning, do it now. The others waited too long. And in that moment I knew the countdown had begun. The next morning I began the transfer. $8,000 from our joint checking account, just enough to look harmless. The bank teller smiled politely, used to seeing Mrs. Whitmore move money for furniture shopping. By afternoon, I'd split it into smaller deposits and routed it through Silver Arc Holdings. Naomi Blake had shown me how to make every transfer look legitimate. Consulting fees, interior design invoices, paper trails clean enough to satisfy even the IRS. Each day I moved a little more. 12,000, 15, 20, always under thresholds that triggered alerts. Meanwhile, Ethan was unraveling. He came home one night stinking of whiskey, his tie crooked, his temper worse. Lost the Morrison account, he muttered, pouring another drink. 40 million in assets gone. They said there were compliance concerns. I kept my face calm. Margaret's tip, I thought. Evelyn had sent an anonymous package to Morrison's legal team 2 weeks ago. That's unfortunate, I said softly. He downed half the glass. Adrian thinks someone's talking to our clients. He says there are rumors about an SEC investigation. His hand shook as he refilled his drink. Ridiculous. The next day, another transfer. The day after, another. By Thursday, Naomi called. Her voice was tight. The FBI contacted me, Layla. They know I represent you. Gregory Whitmore has been under investigation for 18 months. A whistleblower named Daniel Price gave them everything. But they need someone inside to confirm it. She handed me a name. Agent Lauren Pierce. If you're going to move, it has to be now. Once the investigation goes public, all assets will freeze. That night, Ethan was 6 drinks deep before dinner. He paced the living room, phone glued to his ear. Gregory, Adrian, lawyers, crisis managers, all shouting in the distance. Every call ended with more scotch. You've been calm lately, he slurred. Therapy helping? Learning to accept what I can't change, I said smoothly, watching him spiral. Saturday came with the monthly ladies' auxiliary meeting. I almost didn't go. But when I saw Claudia Benson's name on the guest list, I couldn't resist. Layla, darling. Claudia began, voice dripping with sugar. Still playing with your little investment apps? So cute when wives have hobbies. The room tittered with polite laughter. I stirred my tea and smiled. Actually, my portfolio is up 340% this year. How's yours doing, Claudia? The laughter died. She blinked, unsure. I beg your pardon? I particularly enjoyed shorting your husband's pharmaceutical stock last month. I continued pleasantly. Made a fortune when that patent failed. You did know it was rejected, right? The color drained from her face. Around us, the wives leaned in, whispering. Evelyn, serving tea at the corner, hid her smile behind the teapot. By evening, Ethan would hear about it. By morning, Gregory would know. And for the first time, I didn't care. The cracks were spreading. The empire was trembling. And I was the one holding the hammer. The explosion came on a Wednesday. I was in my hotel room when the alert started flashing across my phone. Messages, emails, news notifications. Sienna Cross had filed for divorce from Adrian, armed with proof of infidelity, offshore accounts, and a trail of damning emails. Within an hour, Ethan called 17 times. I let it ring until the 18th. What did you tell her? He demanded. Tell who? I asked calmly. Diana, Sienna, whatever. Adrian thinks I leaked their financials. He's pulling out of the fund. I said nothing. I didn't have to. Evelyn had already warned me. The Whitmore empire was crumbling from the inside. That afternoon, Adrian Cross had filed to dissolve his partnership with Ethan. Half their investors followed. The next day, I called Agent Lauren Pierce at the U.S. Financial Crimes Bureau. I have 5 years of documented insider trading, I said, my voice steady. Timestamps, trade records, internal memos, and recorded conversations. Why come forward now, Miss Hawthorne? She asked. Because silence makes me complicit, I replied. And because they're planning to destroy another woman, the way they tried to destroy me. That night, I placed 3 identical flash drives in 3 different locations, one in a safety deposit box, one at Naomi's office, and one at the Grand Royal Hotel's vault. Each came with instructions. If anything happened to me, release everything to the FBI, the Bureau, and the press. By morning, the dominoes had fallen. Gregory's estate was surrounded by black SUVs. I watched live footage on the news. Gregory Whitmore, handcuffed, his empire seized, his legacy turned to dust. A single message appeared on my phone from Evelyn. A champagne bottle emoji. I laughed until I cried. Weeks later, the trials began. Ethan sat in court beside his lawyer, pale and hollow-eyed, wearing the same Tom Ford suit he'd worn at our wedding. When Naomi Blake played the recording of him boasting, "She's too stupid to read a financial statement," the courtroom fell silent. Judge Helena Moore looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Whitmore, it seems your wife was far more intelligent than you believed." The gavel came down. 15 years for Ethan. Life for Gregory. After the sentencing, Evelyn met me in the lobby, dressed in a new suit, the first I'd ever seen her wear. Together we rode the elevator to the 3rd floor of a small Manhattan building. On the glass door was a new name, Aurora Foundation. "For women rebuilding their lives," Evelyn said softly. Our first client arrived that afternoon. A trembling woman clutching a folder of evidence against her husband. Evelyn smiled. "Every document tells a story," she said. "We'll help you write a new ending." Months later, I stood in my new apartment in Brooklyn. Modest, bright, free. I cooked dinner for myself, burned the chicken slightly, laughed, and didn't care. Ethan once said I couldn't survive a week without him. It had been 6 months. I wasn't just surviving, that I was building an empire of my own. Thank you for following this story till the end. If you found this an emotional journey of betrayal, justice, and inner strength, please help RevengeAmy reach its first 1,000 subscribers. Just a like and subscribe. Your support will be a great motivation for us to continue bringing more inspiring stories. Click subscribe today and be a part of this journey. See you in the next stories.